Hi everyone. Today is August 20th, and we're going to do part three of the Salem, Massachusetts witch trials. And last where I left off, we're going to start using the crystals and the stones to help with picking up on anything that we could left off. And then we're going to try to see what else with the curse of the sheriff with the heart attacks and the issues with the heart where Salem had to really revamp everything as far as law enforcement because there was a lot of issues as someone would go into that position of law enforcement and they would pass away from a heart attack. So the first I'm going to do is called crystal scrying. It's kind of like looking into a crystal ball, but I like to just use a piece of a crystal quartz and I am just going to look through it and then I'm going to speak it out on what I saw. And it is a type of a psychic skill that's called a remote viewing. It's also picking up a lot of residual energy about what they want me to know and to keep it where everything is supposed to be as much as they want to speak in mediumship as a psychic. And then as far as intuitively too. So a lot goes on in a way of a day, of a lay, of a bay, of a day, of a day, and a matalani, yasi, ani, 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 ye, da, di, da, da. And that meant in a way that they could not get it done in a way fast enough to have a fun. So when they had a fun, they couldn't get a done, a DUN, which is a form of devil. And when they couldn't get a form of devil, they couldn't get a piece of paper. And when they couldn't get a piece of paper, they couldn't run it down. And when they couldn't run it down, they would actually be induced to have nausea, vomiting, and diarrhea. And when they would have that type of illness, they couldn't get it DUN, which is up to Satan. And when they couldn't get it up to Satan, they couldn't get it up to a way of a systematic format to have a DONE. So there were figures in Salem Township that were considered demon, considered devil, considered Satan, up to Lucifer like. And for them, it wasn't bad, but it wasn't good. And that's when we go to GOODE. And then when they couldn't get good, they couldn't get lud, and lead, and low, and la, and ta, and ma, and ga. And it would go on with that play of words all day long, like showing me like a carousel all day, like a wheel, but the wheel would always turn backwards and wind up hard, which is like a ball of twine. And the ball of twine would actually get so entangled with the lines that they were using in their craft, these individuals who were criminals doing it to the people who were living there, it would actually make them very hard and numb. And when they would become hard and numb, you couldn't do it. Now, in history, when you use curses, spells, and hexes, and you use like a type of physics, which is a kinetic energy of physics, you see like a line. And when they use that line, you can feel that energy go through you. And when that happens, you actually transfer everything that has been thought through a person. And that is probably one of the most difficult tasks to master if you get up to high priestess and to sorceress. That means you have to maintain a certain amp because of energy and because of inertia, and to maintain that control, to put it into something or into energy. And if it is legal and lawful, you can't even put it into a person, because even state and federal guidelines say that is part of a set-in, and that actually causes mental problems. It causes soft tissue problems to multiple comorbidities. So you really need to know what you're doing per se. So when I touch the black tourmaline, It is a very raw tourmaline, and it is a rough and a cut in a day, in a DAE, which is a type of black powder that they were using. DAE comes from a way that you just can't understand, and it's WEY, so a type of protein. And I do see the cow, but I see more goat's milk, and the way that it was processed to make cheese. So when they made goat cheese, they made like a type of resin soap. And when they made the resin soap, you couldn't do dew. And that was DUE, but also DEW, which goes into the wool, which is a type of like a casing almost. It's really hard to explain, but basically what happens is it's a protective oil, and that is part of burning the midnight oil because they couldn't even go whaling at that time. So they had to have limited resources, and that was almost a devil's advocate with them, was to find the least amount of resources but still live. So when I touch the black obsidian, which is smooth, you can't get the done. So you can't go get the DUN. And that is when they realized they were going into a portion of judicial. And this had been going on for 16 years already. They had not even been able to walk into the court of law like we had known with the crucible. When you touch the selenite, though, it clears out. And what happens, it clears out. That is when they started having a type of nausea, vomiting, and diarrhea that would ended up being clear, which means it was a type of possession. But with clear vomiting, it meant they had nothing in their stomach. They were just drinking water at that point. So was it truly possession of the living, or was it to point of uh, true cachexia, which is a form of severe anorexia? And then they would say, no, you're putting words in my mouth. You're putting words in my mouth. There's nothing wrong with me. And then that game would start playing on. The blue agate, though, they would actually take the clearest things that they could and just try to look through it and see, I'm clear because I can see this. And they would play that game. But then when you take another stone, like a sea stone, this is sea foam, you can't touch the rule. And then they would have a ruler and they would measure you up. So that was the type of game that they were playing in Salem, Massachusetts all day for years. So when it got to the point where they were finally able to get a piece of paper and do proper inheritance and transfer of gifts and abilities, and to teach each other properly how to defend themselves because they could not have certain things already and they were at their lowest point, it was to the point where they would just walk in to the courthouse, and it was such a short judicial. That's why many passed away, because you couldn't understand how fast it happened. Now, Moldavite is a rare stone. It really does come from a meteorite, but in reality, when they say it's stone, you can't believe how fast it all happens when you can't clear. You can't clear. So with gifts and stuff like that, you have to be activated. And in order to be activated in your abilities and your gifts, you have to be aligned. You have to be connected to yourself foremost. So basically, you got to have clear neurological workings. And then you also have to have your chakras on. And if your chakras aren't on and you're not aligned and you're not healthy, it's really not going to work well. There's only been a few instances where someone was very sick and everything stayed on and they were able to do it. And that is just running off their soul power completely. So we're going to look at the peach moonstone runes. and see what else is, because at that point, I'm not really seeing a sheriff, but I still see that young man. I do see the older gentleman that they talked about, and that was the most foremost story, but I see it was the safest story to reveal at that time. I do see the poppet still that was in the eaves, and that was part of defense. So that was the story that I'm getting as a psychic of what was really happening. I do see some uptick during the month of April in Salem, but I do see they're grabbing at, it's really like December. It really is not to be told. Canoe, which is torch and runes, you can't do a lot of fire. So I keep wanting to do this up there, and they're like, I have allergies. I have allergies. Don't worry about it. And when that happens, you just can't do a lot of things. Now, Degas, you can't do a lot of things. And that's all I keep hearing. You just can't do a lot of things. You just can't do a lot of things. That's all you need to know, is that you just can't do a lot of things. So, and then I hear this, and they're doing this, and they're stomping their foot, and they start getting like really annoyed. And it's only with certain individuals. I see in Salem, there's about 1 to 5, and it all depends, and they end up moving. And then when they move away, it goes away. That flows eastward and eastward way. I do see the interstate on one of the roads driving into the Cape, and I see an old toll booth, and there's something in there that could help if someone does. That is something like of a luck, but I see LUK. That causes a lot of havoc, but residual energy affects really happens a lot of ways where you just can't get, almost, it's almost like a cloudiness, almost like a fog that you just can't get rid of until you get out of there. There is like a swirl of energy at times when you walk into the town still in the current date and time. They're showing me the cobblestone street. I see it's well intact, so you have to really look at the water source, because the magistrate would come in and then he would knock on the door, but really it was a female dressed as a male, and they would say, "We're here. Are you well?" And they would do a play on words and check to see what was in their well sources, their water sources, because then that came down the way of the river where we had the issue with the canoe there. That is where a lot of the heritage is. So I see Native Americans step in, and that was they're showing me 1703 to about 1756, 1757. And that is where I see like the last of the Mohegans type of story, where they came in and it was a beknownst of a lay. So that type of strength that comes in, that comes through, but really a wa is not really so much a strength. It comes to the point of a day. And so it had so many other spellings, and that's where it led into the Revolutionary War. So this book that keeps coming up, that's unbeknownst of these 4 individuals that still have a lot of residual affect energy of controlling that area all the way out through. They're showing like almost like a 300-mile radius, and through then like a spider web effect of a transparent line. And I see a lot of things down the well way. With that being said, that one I had to block out. That type of mess, the wealth of mess, can't get anything, even a cross and a bow. And the wholesomeness can't even day guard a type of raft. And that type of raft comes in so slew, you can't even do. And the birth, the BERTH, comes anew, all forms of the spelling to gather up. That comes through on a way of, how do I explain righto in this one? It comes on due. When that comes in, the cross barrow, the cross and bow, the wheelbarrow, and all of it is a type of dig out. The night fire, which is Nadis, has a closing to it. They're showing me the old prison, and those were at that point where we talk about the Cristobal. They were so deeply affected, still fighting this issue. They were mentally insane at that point, mentally insane, criminally insane, because they couldn't get it done. It was still left over. It was still trolling them, that energy, even though they had left those four. When they tried to ash it with birch ash, it trolled those four to the point of degree where pine couldn't resound. So when I use my divination board, which was linked to a lot of historical witchcraft, pine has like an amplifier in it. And when you connect to it hard, when you do tapping, you can feel it through the soles of your feet if you're solid still, and it amplifies out. So when you go back to the blue agate, when water flows, you can't do a duel to the dually. And so even still, trucks to this day have a lot of issues within 1 to 5 years. There's something about vehicles in Salem, Massachusetts, to the outskirts. It's almost like a terrible lemon law out there at days. And they're like, there's got to be an imp trolling still, and you can't even do anything at all. And they all look and they go to the law enforcement. And they're like, what are we supposed to do? There's nothing. So they're like, where's the sheriff? And they're like, they're dead. DED. DED dead. You can't even do DED dead at all. Because they have nothing left in them at all. It means they have no pertinence whatsoever. Absolutely frozen in a stone. But then if they eat salt, the whole lot of them stand up. And that is how funny a hex can be. It can be a type of comical troll where it carries on because it was placed so deep into a person, it carries on until the next life, into their soul. And that's why they're like, I just don't understand why this keep happening. And it really is someone's universal karma towards them. And that is where the bomb lies. So one last look on how these guys had heart attacks, and they're showing me it was so simple. It was something that was placed into them, and it would grow and grow, and they would freeze and lock up. They're seeing me like a type of gout. And then, when they would eat certain foods, especially when it was cured, they would go into a type of heart failure. And they just can't understand. But also too, the type of witchcraft and other things that they were doing needs a type of power, because you need inertia and you need combustion and you need a lot of things to actually propel it forward, especially when you get to that higher level of like a soul title, which is like high priestess and sorcerer and wizard. When you get to that point, uh you have to cast it out. And when you end up casting it out with that force, it leaves like a type of black energy that when you walk through it, you can get caught up in it unbeknownst when you don't have that visual acuity. And it's not a 2020, it's an odd visual acuity, almost like a 2010 to a 2030, and it's very varying and fluctuating. So when you look at it and you go about in your day, you have to say, what is black, what is gray, what is nay, what is bay, all forms of it. And you look at all the historical sites and like what still has such heinous residual affect, because there's still people who say I identify as demon, date all the way through, and they say I'm not a criminal, I don't do criminal acts, but I do these things as part of my practice. So what made those individuals to that point? And I said it was like a stacking in. It was the motive, it was the intent, it was the lust of all that made it. It was the manipulation that continued out into centuries. And that is why it's still a heinous crime that's still not completely solved. It didn't just start with 3 hangings and then stoning someone and going into a court of law. And that is why we still have a lot of unresolved issues, even if you're going into political or current events, because it's carried on through and through. So if you have any questions, that's all I have left to say for Salem. We're going to move into another topic. Somebody had brought up talking about Paul Revere and how that got into this mix of the Revolutionary War, and how it's still a continuance on it. Tea and what else exacerbated it, because it seemed to be a little bit of a catalyst when we started settling into the Americas. Any questions? Go ahead and leave an email. It is in the description box, and we will talk to you soon. Have a great day, guys.